My 65th birthday taught me a brutal truth. Respect is not an inheritance. Sometimes you have to burn something down to get it back. The afternoon started quietly enough. I threw a small garden gathering at my place. Nothing flashy, just a handful of old friends, the afternoon sun warming the patio, and a beautiful tiered raspberry tart my dear friend Nisa spent hours making. Then Vaelia arrived. She was 40 minutes late, making a massive production out of dropping her keys and tossing her limited edition $3,000 Vespera clutch onto the prime wrought iron table. She wanted everyone to see the price tag. The entire afternoon, she barely spoke to anyone, her face buried in a glowing screen, sighing heavily whenever laughter disrupted her scrolling. You could feel the annoyance radiating off her. She hated that this day belonged to me. My son, Kaelen, hovered around her like an anxious moth, constantly asking if she needed water or shade. I watched them from the porch, holding my iced tea. They had moved into my home 11 months ago, supposedly to save up for their own place. Slowly, she had colonized every inch of my sanctuary. My favorite reading nook became her yoga space. My vintage bathroom cabinet filled with her overpriced serums.
But I kept the peace until the tart. Nissa carried the dessert outside, candles flickering softly in the evening breeze. Everyone gathered around, beginning the chorus of the birthday song. Suddenly, Vaelia decided she urgently needed to step inside. The patio was wide open. There were at least 3 different paths she could have taken. Instead, she pushed her way straight toward the narrowest gap by the serving cart. I watched her elbow swing out, sharp and deliberate. It caught the edge of the glass tray. The entire raspberry tart launched into the air, crashing on the stone pavers in a wet, disastrous smear of cream and crushed berries. The singing stopped dead. Vaelia didn't bother to check the mess. She glanced over her shoulder, offered a flat, dead-eyed oops, and pushed the screen door open. Something inside me snapped. A quiet, terrifying clarity washed over me. I didn't scream. I didn't shed a tear over the ruined dessert. I calmly walked over to the wrought iron table, picked up that heavy leather Vespera clutch, and took 3 steps toward the blazing stone fire pit. I tossed it right into the center of the roaring orange flames. The high-end leather caught instantly, hissing and curling as a thick, toxic black smoke plumed into the evening air.
Oops, I whispered into the crackling heat. Kaelen absolutely lost his mind. His face turned a dangerous shade of crimson as he sprinted across the grass. He screamed that I had lost my senses, that I was paying for every cent of that ruined bag. I turned to face him, feeling as steady as the oak tree in my yard. "Send the invoice to me, Kaelen," I told him, my voice completely stripped of emotion. "Right after you ask your wife why she felt the need to sabotage my celebration." I made it very clear right then. If she wanted to drag the authorities into this over a burned accessory, I would gladly file my own reports. Vandalism, intentional destruction, and a year of relentless emotional bulldozing in the very house my late husband built for me. Vaelia rushed out just in time to watch the metal clasp of her beloved bag melt into the ash. The screech that tore from her throat probably woke the next street over. The party ended right there, but the real war was just beginning. The air inside the house turned completely toxic. By the time the sun came up the next morning, my son marched into the kitchen. He slammed his palms on the marble island, scowling, demanding a sincere apology and $3,000 in cash. I brewed a dark roast, leaning against the kitchen island to take a long sip before acknowledging him. "I am not writing a check, and I am certainly not apologizing," I told him, keeping my tone dead flat. "Her tantrums are not my burden to carry." Kaelen groaned, claiming Vaelia was upstairs hyperventilating and that I was being deeply cruel. Instead of arguing in circles with a grown man throwing a toddler-level fit, I washed my cup and headed upstairs. I marched straight into my master suite. For months, Vaelia had hijacked my vanity, burying my simple lotions under towers of imported serums, heat wands, and overpriced exfoliating scrubs. I dragged a heavy shipping box from the closet and ruthlessly swept every single glass dropper, brush, and luxury jar inside. I hauled the heavy carton into the corridor, abandoning it squarely against their bedroom door. Then, I dialed a security contractor. By 3 o'clock, heavy-duty brass deadbolts secured my bedroom and private bath. When Vaelia strutted upstairs that evening expecting to use my deep-soaking tub, she ran headfirst into locked wood. Her hoard of beauty supplies sat abandoned on the floorboards. I could hear her muffled, furious rants echoing down the hall. I simply ignored the noise, turned on a jazz record, and read my book. The real shock hit the next morning. Vaelia wandered into the kitchen, expecting her usual morning service. Ever since they moved in, I had funded the groceries and prepared every meal using my pension. She dragged a stool out and sighed. "Kaelen has a massive pitch today. Are the pancakes ready yet?" "I couldn't tell you," I replied calmly, buttering a slice of sourdough. "That depends entirely on when you start making them." She yanked the main refrigerator open. It was completely bare. 2 days prior, I had relocated all my groceries into a locked mini cooler hidden in my closet. Her voice cracked, pitching high. "Where is the food? We have nothing to eat." "Kaelen knows exactly where the supermarket is," I shot back, never breaking eye contact. "I am a grieving widow, Vaelia, not your personal chef. Feed yourselves from now on." The absolute finality in my face silenced her instantly. The fallout was immediate. By noon, my daughter Alicia phoned from 3 states away. She always backed whoever made her life easiest. "Mom, you are acting insane. Just pay for the bag and cook them dinner. Kaelen gets anxious," she whined. "Speaking of money, my husband needs cash for a startup phase. You obviously have plenty." "The maternal charity fund is bankrupt, Alicia," I said, terminating the call before she could weaponize her guilt.
It was time to sever the remaining leashes. After my husband passed, I had set up a joint safety net account with Kaelen. It held my retirement savings, earmarked strictly for my medical emergencies in case I became incapacitated. Lately, the balance had looked terribly thin. I drove straight to the local branch and demanded paper records for the last half year. Sitting at the banker's desk, my stomach turned. The transaction history was a roadmap of Vaelia's vanity. High-end sushi bars, boutique designer outlets, and luxury spa retreats. They had bled almost $18,000 from my health fund in just 6 months. I instantly drained the remaining balance, transferred it to a solo account, and nuked Kaelen's access card permanently. Reclaiming my financial independence took less than half an hour. At 2 o'clock the following afternoon, my mobile lit up. Kaelen was whispering in absolute panic over the line. "Mom, I'm at the bistro with Vaelia's investors. My swipe was rejected. They said the account is dead. You are ruining my reputation." "The teller gave you accurate information," I replied, casually snipping a dead head off my garden roses. "That money was for my potential hospital stays, not funding a fake high society life. Cover the tab yourself." "My cards are completely maxed out," he hissed desperately. "Then I recommend asking the hostess for some soap and scrubbing the pots," I replied. I killed the connection, powered down the device, and poured a cold glass of lemonade to enjoy the afternoon breeze.
For the first time in his sheltered life, Kaelen had to figure out his own mess. But Vaelia despised losing her grip. To a woman like her, my newly established boundaries weren't just simple rules. They were a direct declaration against her authority. That Friday night, I walked downstairs at 8 p.m. in my silk robe and shearling slippers, only to hear the heavy bass of a Spotify playlist echoing through my hallway. She had invited 3 couples over without a single word to me. They were lounging on my velvet sectional, treating my home like an exclusive downtown club. What caught my eye wasn't the uninvited guests, but the heavy crystal decanter sitting on the coffee table. She had cracked open my late husband's prized 1998 Bordeaux. I didn't shout or throw a fit. I walked straight to the Bluetooth speaker and pulled the plug from the wall. The sudden silence was deafening. I calmly gathered the decanter and the unused crystal goblets, cradling them against my chest. "Good evening," I offered, flashing a polite smile that didn't reach my eyes. Ovidia, we are hosting people, Vaelia hissed, her neck flushing in uneven, embarrassed patches as she tried to save face. I'm thrilled you're socializing, I replied smoothly, turning towards the stairs. But this is my vintage wine, and this is my living room. I prefer to read in silence after 8. You are more than welcome to move your gathering to the garden or your bedroom. I sat down on the armchair, clicked on my brass reading lamp, and opened my novel. The guests couldn't even look me in the eye. They practically tripped over themselves, muttering awkward apologies, grabbing their tailored coats and bolting out the front door within 4 minutes. Vaelia stood trembling in the center of the Persian rug, vibrating with absolute venomous fury. She couldn't form a single sentence before spinning around and stomping up the stairs. I just casually flipped the page, letting the glorious peace and quiet settle over the house. Then came the matter of the sedan. The Silder coupe sitting in the driveway was entirely mine. Title, insurance, registration, everything. But Kaelen had treated it as his personal luxury taxi for the better part of a year, dodging thousands in commuting costs, gas, and maintenance. He always left it parked by the hydrangeas on Sunday nights. While they slept, I slipped out with the spare fob. I drove the coupe 4 blocks down to Nissa's locked garage, tossed her the spare key, and walked back home under the streetlights with my hands in my pockets. Monday morning at 7:30, chaos erupted. The front door violently swung open, then slammed shut. Heavy footsteps thundered toward the kitchen, where I was peacefully steeping my morning matcha. "Where is the car?" Kaelen demanded, his face slick with panic. "It's missing, and Vaelia is going to miss her morning briefing." I blew gently on my hot cup before taking a sip. "I relocated it to a storage unit, Kaelen." "But it is no longer available for your daily transport," I added. "How are we supposed to get downtown?" he yelled, throwing his hands up in genuine distress. "The city metro stops at the corner of Elm, or you can call a rideshare. I am officially done paying the insurance premiums and gas for your free rides. You are a grown man with a salary. Figure it out." He stared at me, completely speechless, before sprinting back upstairs. A moment later, Vaelia's furious shrieks echoed down the hall. 10 minutes later, I watched from the window as the two of them bolted down the sidewalk, dragging their feet and looking thoroughly miserable. By Wednesday, the drama had inevitably summoned my daughter Alicia. She could never resist inserting herself into a crisis, capitalizing on her husband being out of town for business. She appeared on my porch unannounced, with a designer suitcase, fully expecting a warm bed, home-cooked meals, and my unwavering submission to her opinions. I met her in the backyard, sitting near the very fire pit that was now swept clean and cold. Alicia crossed her arms, adopting the tone of a disappointed headmistress. "Mom, this has to end. Kaelen called me hyperventilating. He says you're starving them, you stole their car, and you completely humiliated Vaelia over a minor accident. You are shredding this family apart." "I am taking back my property, Alicia," I said, entirely unmoved by her theatrics. "You and your brother grew up believing it is my lifelong job to subsidize your mistakes. That ends now." Alicia let out a heavy, dramatic breath, finally dropping the righteous act. "Look, things are incredibly tight for me right now, too. I actually came because I need an advance on my inheritance. It's just $60,000. With that, I can rescue my husband's failing startup and maybe toss Kaelen some cash so they can finally move out." I just stared at her. The mask had completely slipped. This wasn't a rescue mission for her brother. It was a financial shakedown masquerading as family mediation. "There are no early payouts, Alicia," I told her softly but firmly.
The money your father and I saved was to ensure I don't die in poverty. It is not venture capital for a bad business or a slush fund for Vaelia's expensive handbags. I stood up, brushing off my trousers. If you are here to be my daughter, the guest room is yours. If you are here to act like a debt collector, there's a Marriott right by the highway. She stayed, naturally, spending the entire night whispering fiercely with Kaelen behind closed doors. They thought the two of them could still pressure me into surrendering. They were terribly wrong. The guest bedroom they were using had a massive space. Over the past year, Vaelia had aggressively annexed it, filling the room with commercial clothing racks, towers of shoeboxes, and full-length mirrors. She had basically transformed my home into her own private retail boutique. That weekend, while Elijah, Kaelen, and Vaelia were out of the house, I completely dismantled her little setup. Every silk dress, stiletto box, standing mirror, and rolling rack went straight onto the floor of Kaelen and Vaelia's bedroom. Once the space was completely gutted of her vanity, I scrubbed the hardwood floors until they shined. I dragged my heavy wooden easel, my neglected canvas stacks, and my expensive watercolor sets out of the dusty attic and arranged them perfectly by the afternoon light of the window. I installed another heavy brass deadbolt on the door. After years of putting it off, I finally had my private art studio back. When they returned that afternoon, the reaction was violently explosive. A piercing, hysterical scream rattled the upstairs floorboards the second Vaelia pushed her bedroom door open and discovered the chaotic, towering mountain of her precious wardrobe dumped on the carpet. Kaelen came charging down the staircase, practically foaming with absolute rage. He looked completely unhinged. "You have no right to do this. You dumped her custom designer pieces in a massive pile like they were absolute garbage," he roared, the veins popping visibly against his neck. I was standing by the large bay window, peacefully spritzing my blooming Phalaenopsis orchids with a small copper mister. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice by a single decibel. I just turned my head to look at him. "That space was designed for guests, Kaelen," I said, my voice steady over the gentle hiss of my copper plant mister. "Not for a commercial retail expansion. If the master suite is too cramped for the two of you now, the front door is wide open." The pressure cooker of my newly enforced boundaries finally blew their marriage to pieces. Stripped of my wallet, the luxury coupe, and the sprawling square footage they hadn't earned, the foundation of their relationship became impossible to ignore. The forced, polite smiles vanished entirely. From the quiet sanctuary of my restored art studio, I listened to their bitter fights escalating every single afternoon. Then, on a stormy Tuesday evening, the entire charade collapsed. "I am done with this absolute prison," Vaelia screamed. I heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of designer luggage wheels dragging across the hallway hardwood. She aggressively stomped down the staircase. I happened to be standing by the marble island, quietly steeping some Earl Grey. She paused at the threshold, glaring at me with raw, undisguised hatred. She waited. She fully expected me to crack, to offer a desperate apology, or to beg her to stay to save Kaelen's fragile marriage. I just picked up my silver spoon, stirred the dark liquid, and met her furious stare with utter, crushing indifference. Her jaw locked tight. Realizing she had absolutely zero power left in this house, she yanked the heavy front door open and marched out to the black rideshare idling in the driveway. She never looked back. Once the endless stream of free rent, free transport, and free gourmet meals evaporated, her deep devotion to my son magically vanished right alongside it. Alicia saw the writing on the wall. With no cash left to extract and her alliances shattered, she packed her bags and fled by sunrise. That left Kaelen entirely isolated. He sat alone surrounded by towering cardboard boxes in a trashed bedroom, finally confronting the bleak reality of his own adult choices for the very first time. I didn't feel a single drop of pity for him. Honestly, I felt a profound, settling calm. But I still had one final loose end to tie. 2 weeks dragged by. Kaelen tried desperately to claw his way back into my good graces by playing the wounded survivor. He started washing dishes without being prompted. He spoke in a soft, pathetic whisper and constantly tried to spark nostalgic conversations about his childhood soccer games. He was waiting for me to cave, to pull him in and say, "Oh, my poor boy, you can live here forever. I will fix everything." One afternoon, he found me sitting out back near the fire pit, watching the leaves blow across the grass.
"Mom, I know I completely ruined things," Kaelen murmured, slumping into the chair beside me and staring at his boots. "Vaelia totally manipulated me. I was a fool. I am so deeply sorry." "I accept your apology, Kaelen," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on the distant tree line. He let out a massive, shuddering breath, visibly relaxing. He genuinely believed the storm was over, and he had secured his permanent residency again. "Thank you. I swear things will be completely different around here now. I raised a single finger, cutting him off instantly. "No, Kaelen. I am glad you finally understand your mistakes, but that changes absolutely nothing about your current living arrangement. You have exactly 60 days to save your paychecks, secure an apartment lease, and vacate my home." He stared at me, completely paralyzed by the shock. "You're throwing me out? But Vaelia is gone." "Vaelia was only a symptom," I interrupted, keeping my tone gentle but forged from absolute steel. "The actual disease was that you viewed me as an endless, permanent safety net. You are 35 years old. It is time to construct your own life under your own roof. I love you, but my days of raising you are over."
He didn't scream. He didn't try to negotiate or throw a tantrum. Kaelen looked into my eyes and saw a terrifying, unbreakable resolve. He knew it was over. 2 months later, he shoved the last of his taped boxes into a rented moving truck and dropped his brass key onto the kitchen counter. That evening, I walked out to the backyard and lit the stone fire pit. I sliced myself a massive piece of leftover lemon raspberry tart, sank deep into my favorite patio chair, and watched the orange flames twist into the dark sky. The house behind me was completely still. It was a deep, rich, glorious silence. I took a sip of my hot tea, smiled into the shadows, and finally took a real, full breath. My sanctuary was mine again. People often confuse familial love with silent, agonizing suffering. But tolerating disrespect in your own sanctuary isn't keeping the peace. It is self-destruction. Boundaries never destroy a real family. They just expose who was using you all along.